We're in beautiful Lovell Canyon today between Las Vegas and Pahrump off Highway 160. And the goal is Indecision Peak. And this is the most streamlined starting point. I've experimented with a few different routes and it looks like found the most streamlined route here. So look at the cloud formations up there. What's going on there? Hopefully we won't be facing that when we hit the Rainbow Mountains upper Crest ridgeline. So what we're going to do is start up this wash. There's kind of a trail. It's unmarked, but it leads to the Little Zion trailhead area. So we're going to head up this wash. It's just beyond Rainbow Springs Road, which is the first road that branches off to the right or east from Lovell Canyon Road. This is not actually a road, but it's a wash, and there is an unmarked trail here. So we're going to head to over the mountains in the horizon, which are the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, and then descend to Indecision Peak. Here we go. Of course, there's a fork in the road early on. You want to take the right fork. We've only gotten about 200 feet and we reached this fork. So you want to head for the right. There are cool little camping spots on this little road and throughout Lovell Canyon. And you can camp here for about 14 days before you have to move. It's free. There are no amenities, however. You could actually drive this rather nice little unpaved road if you have a high-centered vehicle, but it's only 1,000 feet from Lovell Canyon Road, so you're not going to save much as opposed to parking on Lovell Canyon Road. Okay, just beyond that last point, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. There you see the power lines ahead. That leads in a direction we do not want to go. It's more parallel to the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. And this is where the road gets really wonky. You can continue on in this direction if you're driving and you want to parallel Lovell Canyon Road. But what we want to do is look for the wash that we're going to ascend. And I believe that wash is over this ridge here. So, little complicated spot. This, by the way, is road 25907. But we're leaving it now, and we're going to find where the trail begins. And the trail is actually the center of a wash. So let's go over this ridge, see if we can find it. Okay, now on top of this little ridge, there's that point where things got a little wonky down there. On top of this ridge, now we get an idea where we're heading, and I believe that we're heading for an opening in those hills ahead. So we're going to need to just cross this undefined sagebrush area, and a trail should appear in a bit. We'll find out. Okay, we're continuing to cross this undefined area of sage and grass. And now things are starting to clarify. And what we're looking at is potentially, you see an opening in those hills? I believe we cross right through the opening ahead. And you see that higher hill in the background. That's the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, and that is our goal. So yes, we're crossing this undefined desert area and looking for what I would loosely define as a trail. It's going to be in a wash, and that wash is going to lead us up in this direction. So you just have to trust that as you head in this direction and watch the map on the linked page on Las Vegas Area Trails, that leads you directly where we want to be, which is right on this course. And by the way, if we look behind us, and there's Potosi Mountain, if we look behind us, we see that we've been roughly traveling west. I mean, we've been traveling east. We're looking west. We've been traveling east from Lovell Canyon Road, which is down in this direction. You can see the power lines on that little maintenance road that parallels Lovell Canyon Road. We crossed that early on. So we are directly on course, but we haven't seen anything that indicates a trail or a pathway yet. We just have to trust it's going to be there. Okay, very important. You're looking for this little wash. This is actually the trail, if you could call it that. It's actually a little wash, but anyway, this is what we were looking for. And we found it pretty directly. I gotta admit that I used CalTopo GPS app, and you can set a compass heading, just follow the route on the mapped link page on Las Vegas Area Trails. And let's look back to see the direction we began. There's the hill that I call Landmark Bluff, and that's where we came from. Now, other things are becoming familiar. Up here, you see that pointy high point up there. Just below that to the left is the upper end of Saltgrass Road. Now you could go that route. I've done that before, but wow, it's convoluted. This is really the streamlined route. You had to trust your compass bearing and the map on the link page on Las Vegas Area Trails to get to this point. But now that we're in this wash, this will lead us all the way through the opening ahead in the hills. You see it right there. That's going to lead us then up to the upper Crest ridgeline. And once we summit that ridgeline, we'll be looking down on the Indecision Peak ridge and ultimately Indecision Peak. So yeah, this is the most streamlined route if you want to reach Indecision Peak from Lovel Canyon. Okay, the wash gets a little messy. This is looking back. So you still have to go by your compass or GPS, and it clears up a little bit ahead, but yeah, it's not going to be a straight shot. It's not going to be an easy shot getting to the hills and the opening ahead there. You know, that's what you want to head for. That opening. But things are going to wind around. The reason you don't mind winding around is that it's a lot faster to be in this wash than to be plowing across the sagebrush and other types of obstacles outside of the wash. Okay, I'm going to use my favorite word for this route, which is wonky. And yeah, the wash branches off in different directions, but what you need to do is stay in the wash, and the branch that leads more to see that dark high point in the background. And there's this wash is going to weave through the hills in the foreground, the lighter hills, and um, and you just keep heading toward that darker hill in the background. And it may not be darker on the day you're here. A lot of clouds today, but that's what you're heading for. You see hills in the foreground and that hill in the background, which is the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. So onward through this wonky wash, and I can see footprints, maybe hoof prints um, from the burros and other animals in the area. Lets you know that at least someone else has found this wash as a nice route through the desert. And to give you an idea where we are, such a beautiful desert. Look at this. And there's Potosi Mountain. And in this direction, the hill that I call Landmark Bluff, where we began, at the base of that bluff. Okay, let's continue along this wonky little wash. Here's a little tip that'll help you keep on track as this wonky wash splits off in lots of different directions. You see these depressions. These are hoof marks. And whatever made these depressions is smarter than we are. So when you're in doubt, if you see a wash route that has hoof marks, go for it. Now, we see two hills, one on the right, the other on the left. We're going to head right between those hills and continue on to that darker high point in the background. So that's another tip to help you keep on track. You want to get to where you recognize these two hills in the foreground and know you're heading between the hills wherever the wash is taking you. And the wash is going to take you right between. Just stick to the wash that leads mostly in that direction. And looking around, you can see Landmark Bluff in the background there, where we came from. So it's always good to look at a lot of different signs. One is my GPS, the other is the hills that we're navigating ahead, and looking back to Landmark Bluff, and then of course Potosi Mountain to the south. So all of these are signs that keep you on track. And believe me, this is the most streamlined route to Indecision Peak from Lovell Canyon. So definitely find this route and do it. Still in the wash with the hoof marks. And just wanted to point out a good reference point. Remember that pointy hill down and to the left? You see it descending? That would be the upper end of Saltgrass Road. But you want to be here. Believe me, I'll show you how it saves you a whole lot of pain and suffering to take this route. But what we're doing is, you see how that pointy hill heads downward more gradually to the right, where it reaches the horizon right there. You can see the path of this wash. We're going to wind around and right past the, it would be the southern end of that pointy hill, or the right end of the pointy hill. So now we get much more assurance through the landmarks to add to what we see on GPS. Continuing along this nice streamlined wash. I called it a wonky wash below, sorry, but it was a little wonky. For the most part, the wash has been very nice traveling. I made some really good time, even though we're winding around a bit. Remember that pointy hill that I said was above Saltgrass Road? Well, we were going to pass around the lower south or right side of that hill. Here we are. And if you were to ascend right here and continue upward, you get to the high point and then be looking down on the upper end of Saltgrass Road. But as I said, we're continuing around the base of that hill, and I'll show you the hill from the other side. Then you'll see everything more clearly. We're continuing on the wash. In a bit, we're going to leave the wash. I'll show you that point and also show you an alternate route that will lead you to Little Zion. When you're in the wilderness and not on established trails, it's always good to know a whole lot of signs that will confirm you are where you need to be. And I mentioned just a moment ago, this ridge, this is the lower part of the ridge that leads up to um, an area that descends to Saltgrass Road, the upper end of Saltgrass Road. And here are some markers that indicate you're entering the wilderness, as if you hadn't been there already, but that's the official wilderness boundary. So yeah, that's additional confirmation that we are on track. And this wash has just been amazing once it actually turned into a defined wash, wide thoroughfare, the expressway up to Indecision Peak from Lovell Canyon. This is an important juncture. Here, you notice a trail leading off to the right out of the wash. That trail actually loops around to the Little Zion trailhead and is another route to Little Zion. In fact, here is a cairn to mark the beginning of that trail. And why is that important? If you wanted to make the Little Zion trail a nice loop, you would head down this trail in the opposite direction. I mean, you'd head down the trail and into this wash from the Little Zion trail connectors, and then you'd head down this wash back to Lovell Canyon Road, taking the same route I've taken. That would make a loop. It's not the most direct approach to Little Zion, this route that I have taken. If I was going to Little Zion, I would go to the page on LasVegasAreaTrails.com for Little Zion and find a more direct route from Lovell Canyon that would go up Rainbow Springs Road to the end of that road and then navigate over to Little Zion. But again, if you wanted to make that a loop, an interesting loop. When you returned from Little Zion, you might take this trail, the other end of the trail, coming in this direction, and loop back to this wash, which would take you down to Lovell Canyon Road. Okay, what we're going to do instead is we continue on the wash, but we are off any trails that are marked on maps at this point. We continue in the wash, and the next thing we're looking for is where to leave this wash and ascend the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. And I'll be showing you that point, which is very important. Okay, I promised to show you that ridgeline that leads up to the point above Saltgrass Road from the other side of the ridgeline after we passed the ridgeline. And there it is. Nice, neat little ridgeline. If you took this ridgeline, this golden grassy ridgeline upward, you would eventually be looking down at the upper end of Saltgrass Road. So yeah, just to give you another reference where we are, and I like to know a whole lot of different signs that they just give a fuller picture of Lovell Canyon and the wilderness area. We see all the connections. So yeah, heading up toward, I'll show you when we ascend when and where we ascend the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, which is ahead. And that ascent point is very important. I can't point out the major decision peak yet. I think this is major decision peak. I could be wrong. I'll eat my words later. But major decision peak is the beginning of the ridgeline that leads down to Indecision Peak. So we'll be watching for that. I'll show you the ascent point where we begin to ascend toward Major Decision Peak, if that is the peak. Okay, onward. Remember that rocky high point that I said, well, maybe that's Major Decision Peak, and that would lead down to Indecision Peak. No, it's not. We've already passed it. We're continuing along in this direction. I'll show you where to leave this wash and ascend toward Major Decision Peak, which is further along here. The wash below is getting a little narrow and windy, a lot of barriers. So it does help to just eyeball the direction we're headed. And this is the direction of Major Decision Peak. So we know we want to ascend that ridge. We want to take the most easy, gradual route to that ridge. And it may not be in the wash anymore. We don't know for sure, but it helps to know, yes, there is our ridge line that we want to ascend. So let's just kind of wing it, see what is the better, the wash below or just leaving the wash for this opened area and heading up to this high point. And by the way, let's look around. That is on the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. And looking in this direction, we have additional high points. One of these high points is First Creek Overlook Cliff, where you look straight down on Mount Wilson. And I believe that is up here. That is the cliff. Not entirely sure, but I know the cliff is north on the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline from Major Decision Peak. And here you're looking at the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline. It really helps to know where you are. So let's continue on and head for this high point. And when we get up here on, what you see on the horizon there, we should be able to look down on Indecision Peak and the ridge line that leads to Indecision Peak. We've made very good time thanks to the wash we've been in, but there comes a time where you got to leave the wash in order to keep your pace. That hill ahead is indeed, the hill that I pointed out is indeed our target. And so we need to stay a little bit on the right slope as much as we can, just passing the top of the hill on the right. So we'll see how all that goes, but let's continue on upward and just to give you an idea where we are. There below us is the wash I was in, and it does get really gnarly around this point, so it's good that we ascended to the ridge and toward that hill. And there you have the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline heading south toward Little Zion and Hidden Peak, and ultimately the Mountain Spring Trailhead. And then looking around, the views opening up, there's Potosi Mountain. And if you look at the depression here between the hills, that's the route that we took. That's the route we're going to take back, is just weaving our way in the nice wash around the hills and over to the landmark bluff where we began. So yeah, just through that depression, and the wash becomes really nice in the depression. And then another thing that I wanted to point out was, yes, there is that high point above the upper end of Saltgrass Road, and you can see the grassy ridge line leading up to that point. If you were going to Saltgrass Road, you would head for that high point. You'd look down and see Saltgrass Road. And the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline heading north is over in this direction. We'll get a better look. But for now, we want to continue upward on this slope, which is much better at this point than the wash below, and then angle over to the right just before we hit the summit of this hill that we're on. And here we have our first look at what I can say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is Major Decision Peak. That's where the ridge line begins to descend toward Indecision Peak. And yes, we have taken the best route so far. But now what we need to do is see if we can find the best route to angle across to that point. And then we're going to angle over to the ridge line. We don't want to go all the way up to Major Decision Peak. I will show a video from the summit of Major Decision Peak in a bit, but Yeah, for this trip, we're angling to the right and over that slope just below Indecision, Major Decision Peak. And then here's looking along the ridgeline. Yes, and once um, we descended that side of the depression below, and that really puts you down into the wash at a point where it's just really gnarly down there. So this is still the most streamlined route. So we're going to see how it all depends on how we get up and over the ridge and over to the next ridge, which is that ridge to the right, but we don't want to hit that ridge low. We want to hit it very high because that ridge leads up to the ridge line that descends to Indecision Peak. So let's see if we can angle across here and how that looks. We'll find out. Okay, that's looking up toward Major Decision Peak. We don't want to go all the way up there. So the point is to traverse this slope, and then we're going to traverse over. Hopefully we'll find a path to traverse over to the ridge line that leads down to Indecision Peak. And there you can see for the first time Hidden Peak area. That's the peak on the left. And below Hidden Peak is Little Zion, right in there. And then if you were over there at Hidden Peak, you'd be able to traverse the Upper Crest Ridgeline over to Mountain Springs Trailhead. And if you're here and you wanted to do that, you would take this ridge immediately below and head up to circle around this rocky high point, and then you'll see where the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline would continue around, and you'd hit the southern part of the ridge line where there's a really nice trail that you'd pick up right about in this point, somewhere above Little Zion. So anyway, that gives you an idea of the surroundings, what we're doing. And here you can see Potosi Mountain in the background on the horizon, and over to the Nopa Range in the distance. We'll explore that at some point. You see all the way through our little pathway through the hills in that low area. That's where that really nice wash was, and then it angles over toward Landmark Bluff. And then over here, the high point on the grassy ridge that looks down on the upper end of Saltgrass Road. So there you have it. And if you wanted to continue north on the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline from this point, you'd head up in this direction, take you to the area above Mount Wilson, eventually Rainbow Mountain, Bridge Mountain, and over down into Red Rock Canyon at the Willow Spring area, White Rock Mountain area. Okay, let's continue to traverse this ridge and see if we can find another traverse that angles over toward the Indecision ridgeline that leads down to Indecision Peak. I've been traversing this ridgeline or spur And there's the other spur. We want to be on the other side of that. But on the way back, we do want to be back on this ridgeline we're on here. And there is Major Decision Peak. Maybe I called another high point Major Decision Peak. I don't know at this point. All I know is that yes, we need to traverse this slight gully, make it as slight as we can, get up to the next ridge line, and then from that ridge line we should be able to see Indecision Peak and the whole ridge line leading down to Indecision Peak. So continuing on, I guess I could have stayed higher on this ridge line, but eventually I would have had to traverse over to the next ridge line. So I think we're still on a pretty good course. It's a little dicey along this loose rock, but no exposure. You just need to figure out what is the best route at every point to the point you're aiming at. And right now, that's where we're aiming, looking for a best route that doesn't involve going all the way up to Major Decision Peak. So let's just see how we're going to do that. Well, I'm on that next high ridge line. From this point, you can see Indecision Point, and then below it, Indecision Peak. So, note to self on the return trip. Let's look at what we've just traversed. I traversed this area too low. So, on the return trip, I'm going to come to this rocky high point, which you can see from Indecision Point. I'm going to come to the right side of this rocky high point and then traverse over a little higher, maybe a little bit up there, not all the way up to Major Decision Peak up there, but a little higher, maybe right down in this area. Get on that ridge that you see and just ride that ridge all the way down to the wash. So that should be a lot faster on the return trip. On this trip, I descended and ascended, plus I was on some terrain that was pretty much sloped, and I was traversing the slope the hard way. There, by the way, is Landmark Bluff. So now you can see pretty much where we are and the route I'm going to take to return. But for now, traverse this slope, head over to the base of Indecision Point, circle around the right side, and then descend the slope to Indecision Plateau, where the sandstone begins. Descend to the saddle below Indecision Plateau, and then up to the summit of Indecision Peak, which you can see through the trees. So that's the big picture. Let's go ahead and do it. And now it's pretty much a descent to Indecision Peak, and we need to hit the ridge line below and descend. So we need to get off this point. Requires a little down climbing, hopefully not too bad. We'll find out. And then here's the view from above. You can see Potosi Mountain, Landmark Bluff, Nopal Range, the valley before Death Valley. when you leave Pahrump and head for Death Valley. You cross that valley. And over to Griffith Peak, the La Madre Ridgeline. You can see Rainbow Mountain in the center there, La Madre Ridgeline behind, and then over to Mount Wilson and back to the Indecision Peak Ridgeline. Indecision Ridgeline. How's that? I'm now on Indecision Ridgeline, heading toward Indecision Point, which is through the trees ahead. And yeah, from here, awesome view of Mount Wilson. And then in the background, now let's take a closer look. There's Mount Wilson, southern summit point. Northern summit is up in this direction. Maybe that's it right up there. Yeah, I bet it is. And below us, First Creek Canyon. And then over to Rainbow Mountain. And then beyond in the distance, the La Madre Mountains Ridgeline. On the horizon there. And then over in this direction would be the Wilson Ridgeline. And in the further distance, there's Harris Mountain. And then there's a saddle that descends to the left and ascends to Griffith Peak. So we'll see better views of those areas from a little bit below on this ridge, and then up here, Major Decision Peak. So there you have it. I traversed to this point. Once I left the wash, it was a little messier than it should have been. What I might have done is stay just a little higher, but not all the way up to Indecision Point. And I mean, Major Decision Peak. Getting them all mixed up. They all sound the same. But yeah, on the way back, I want to be over at this next ridge line, over, and then one more ridge line to get that nice slope that leads down to the wash. Right at the area of the wash becomes really easy to navigate, and then we're home free. And in the meantime, yeah, Potosi Mountain. Hidden Peak area, and Little Zion right down in this area. There's Little Zion. Beautiful area. I keep mentioning Little Zion. You got to go there if you haven't been to Little Zion, spring or fall, best time. Okay, let's continue now along Indecision Ridgeline toward Indecision Peak. Indecision Point ahead. I'm going to angle around to the right through this area in order to maximize my time. And once we get up there beyond Indecision Point, we'll be able to look down on Indecision Plateau and Indecision Peak. So yeah, here's the view from this point. Pretty amazing. Griffith Peak now in much grander view. There it is in the clouds. Okay, let's continue on. Here's the view from Indecision Point. And you see down to Indecision Peak. The Indecision Plateau is where the sandstone begins. Then there's a saddle to descend to, and then an ascent to Indecision Peak. And there's Major Decision Peak. Cold wind on this last week in April. Here's a nice quiet spot from that roaring wind to look around and to assess the next stretch, which is down to Indecision Plateau. You see the red rock down there. And then below that to the saddle. And then we'll see how far we can get up toward Indecision Peak. There is the true summit. There are two summits there. And the first summit is here. So we need to get past that first summit to the second summit. So we've got Indecision Plateau, the saddle, and then the first summit and on to the second summit. And yeah, I need to be back to Indecision Plateau from the summit an hour and a half from now in order to be sure we're going to finish in the light. So let's see how that all works out. I could probably be back at this point 2 hours from now and we still be good. But that's the drop dead turnaround point. Okay, onward. We've descended from above. We're now on Indecision Plateau. Beautiful red rock area with just an incredible view. There is the Las Vegas Strip. So here's Indecision Plateau. Now the challenge, descending to the saddle below the first summit. And a good spot is right here. You see this rocky formation. And just on this side of the rocky formation is a good descent point, and I'll show you in a minute. Just wanted to show the view from this little plateau. And you can descend from this point also and just angle along. Maybe we'll do that. We'll descend from here and angle along downward to the saddle below. But yeah, look at this. Great shot of Mount Wilson. So yeah, let's keep moving. We're gonna run out of light if we don't speed up a little bit. Okay, hugging this little ramp and heading down to the saddle. Okay, I angled around this way and found, just spiraled upward on the other side of this high point, and just found a nice ramp. You can see there's no descent from that side of the plateau, and we're looking up at the plateau above, Indecision Plateau, where we just descended from. And now looks like there are a couple potential routes here. I don't know how this low route along this side would work. I'm going to take the high route. If I choose the wrong route and end up at a dead end, that's the end. We'll have to turn around because we don't have enough time to try two different routes. So I'm going to try this higher route just to see how that turns out, rather than the low route here. Onward. Okay, angling around slightly to the left side, or the south side of this little high point up here on the way to the false summit. Seemed to do the trick so far. And onward and upward. Encouraging is this little cairn. So, maybe that'll help, and at least lets us know we're on a good route. What happens after this, we do not know, but the false summit is right there, and then it's over to the true summit. So let's continue onward. I attempted heading up straight up the middle, not good, but I did notice the cairn down below here looked pretty scary from below over there. That's why I tried the middle. But when I saw the other side, it didn't look quite so bad. So let's try this. Here you can see the cairn. And you see why I didn't attempt it at the first glance, because it looks like it's just hanging over the edge of eternity here. See if I can turn around, give you an idea of what we're looking at. Yeah. So let's go over there, just see if it is indeed a pathway. And I think that it could be, because from on top of the south summit, the false summit, which I have made now, I could see below, and it looked okay. Let's find out. We'll have an inch my way around the corner here, just above that cairn. It looks like this might be possible. So let's head up there and see what the world looks like from the top of that. And that is the false summit. Here we go. Okay, don't ask me how I got here. But yes, we are on the far side of the false summit. And now I see a little cairn below, and what could be a route, no promises, to the true summit. And definitely running out of time, but let's see. Let's see if we can get there within a half hour. Here we go. Okay, final approach to the summit ahead, and there is the true summit of Indecision Peak. So let's wind our way upward. I got 20 minutes to get there, and then the challenge will be retracing my way over around the false summit. Once I get to Indecision Plateau, or even the saddle, I'm great. There is Indecision Point. So yeah, we're gonna need to hightail it once we hit the summit. So let's continue on up. Yeah, there's the summit about 15 feet away. I'm not going to ascend this little exposed ledge up to the summit because the wind is just roaring too violently. Here you can see Las Vegas Strip. And this is the summit area of Indecision Peak. Here's Mount Wilson. And then we need to figure out how to trace our way back past the false summit. And then over to Indecision Plateau. Then up to Indecision Point and around Major Decision Peak, around the left side, upper left side, and then down. I'm not going to record much on the way back simply because we're out of time. So we really need to move. I want to get down in that lower wash before dark and possibly all the way back to Lovell Canyon Road before dark. So here we go. And there you have it, Indecision Peak from Lovell Canyon Road. So here we are back at the Beast on Lovell Canyon Road, making this about a 10-hour out and back from this point over to Indecision Peak, which is in that direction, beyond all those hills that you see. Awesome experience. Wow, what a way to get to know Lovell Canyon, the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, and just the whole route between.